Hello, everyone. Today, we're diving into a story that's nothing short of legendary, not just a journey, but the incredible tale of one of the greatest figures in the Lord of the Rings universe, Gandalf. Have you ever wondered why Gandalf is so essential to the story of Middle-earth? He appears as a grey-robed wizard with a long white beard and wise, caring eyes, and yet, he's far more than he seems. Gandalf is the spark of hope, a beacon of courage, and a guide for those who lose their way. But is Gandalf simply an old, wise wizard? Or is there something deeper, something more powerful, that makes him the hero Middle-earth needed? Most people see Gandalf as a guide, a mystical friend, or the savior of the Fellowship of the Ring. But what if I told you that behind his humble guise lies an immortal Maya spirit from Valinor, a being who walked in the gardens of the gods and witnessed the rise of the first great shadows? He wasn't just a friend to Bilbo and Frodo. Gandalf was there fighting for Middle-earth long before the name Aragorn was known or the kingdoms of the Dwarves were in ruin. So, do you truly understand who Gandalf is? If you think he's just a wizard, then you've only seen the surface. Today's story will give you an entirely new perspective on Gandalf, not only as a wizard but as a timeless hero, an unsung leader, and a flame of unyielding hope. Let's dive deep into every moment and every journey he embarked upon, from his early days in Valinor learning compassion from Lady Nienna, to his battles against the dark powers of Sauron. And if you enjoy this content, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and ring the bell to stay tuned for more. Let us know what you think about Gandalf and the timeless legends of Middle-earth. Now, let's set off on this epic adventure and discover the mysteries of Gandalf the Grey. Part 1. Beginnings in Valinor, Olórin, the spirit of compassion. In the timeless lands of a man, beyond the reach of mortal eyes, and untouched by the scars of Middle-earth, lies Valinor, the hallowed home of the Valar, the great spirits that shaped the world itself. Amid the verdant groves and eternal starlight of Valinor, there lived a Maya known as Olórin. He was a being of quiet wisdom and profound compassion, a spirit whose very presence brought comfort and strength to others, even in the darkest moments. Long before he became Gandalf, Olórin walked in the serene gardens of Lórien, the realm of Ermo, the Valar of dreams and visions. Here, he spent countless ages in contemplation, absorbing the beauty and peace that flowed through Valinor. But it was in the halls of Nienna, the Lady of Mourning and Compassion, that Olórin found his truest calling. Under her gentle guidance, he learned not only to sympathize with the sorrow and suffering of others, but also to inspire them to rise above it. This quiet Maya understood that hope was as crucial as any weapon, that courage could spark in the most unexpected places if someone simply believed it could. Olórin's wisdom, however, would soon be called upon in a way none in Valinor could have foreseen. Far away in Middle-earth, a shadow was growing, a darkness that even the bright lands of a man could not ignore. The servants of Morgoth, the great enemy defeated long ago, were rising again. Chief among them was Sauron, Morgoth's most faithful lieutenant, who had survived his master's fall and sought to dominate Middle-earth for himself. Under Sauron's influence, fear and despair took root in the hearts of elves, men, and dwarfs, and the world grew darker with each passing century. The Valar, though powerful, had agreed long ago not to interfere directly in the affairs of Middle-earth. They understood that the free peoples must shape their own destinies. Yet they also saw the peril of Sauron's return and knew that Middle-earth would need guidance if it was to resist his growing power. And so, they devised a plan, a subtle intervention, a mission for a group of messengers who would carry wisdom and strength without ruling over the peoples they aided. It was Manwë, the chief of the Valar, who decided to send the Astari, a group of wizards, to Middle-earth. The task of the Astari was not to seek power or dominion, but to counsel, to encourage, and to embolden the free peoples to stand against Sauron. Manwë called upon the mightiest of the Maya to volunteer, and among those chosen were Curumo, later known as Saruman, Iwendil, later known as Radagast, and two blue wizards whose names would fade from history. Finally, there was Olórin, whom Manwë himself trusted above all. Yet, when Olórin was summoned before Manwë and told of the mission, he hesitated. Unlike his fellow Maya, Olórin had no desire for power or glory. He confessed to Manwë that he felt he lacked the strength to stand against such darkness, that he feared the task might be beyond him. It was precisely this humility, this self-doubt, that made Manwë certain Olórin was the right choice. Manwë, along with Vada, Queen of the Stars, saw in him a wisdom that none of the others possessed, a wisdom born not of power, but of compassion and resilience. Manwë spoke to Olórin with kindness, urging him to accept the task, knowing that Middle-earth needed not only might but hope. And so, Olórin accepted. He took on the name Gandalf, meaning Elf of the Wand, and prepared to depart the bliss of Valinor for the uncertain lands of Middle-earth. Unlike Saruman, who would arrive cloaked in grandeur, Gandalf chose the guise of an old man, humble and unassuming, so that he might walk unnoticed and earn the trust of those he wished to help. When Gandalf arrived in Middle-earth, he came not with fanfare or splendor, but as a wanderer. Almost immediately, he found himself at the Grey Havens, the westernmost shores of Middle-earth, where the Elves would later set sail back to Valinor. There, he met Círdan the Shipwright, an ancient elf and guardian of the Havens, who looked upon Gandalf with a wisdom born from ages untold. Círdan, recognizing Gandalf's true purpose and spirit, entrusted him with Narya, the Ring of Fire, one of the 3 elven rings crafted to withstand the power of Sauron's One Ring. Narya was a symbol of hope and courage, a tool to inspire resilience in the hearts of those who would need it most. It was with this gift that Gandalf began his long journey, though he kept its power hidden, using it not for show or dominance, but as a quiet force that would ignite strength in the hearts of others. For centuries, Gandalf traveled in obscurity, moving through the lands of elves, men, and dwarfs, learning their languages, customs, and fears. He became known as the Grey Pilgrim, a figure both mysterious and comforting, whose rare visits brought tales of distant lands and knowledge of ancient lore. Unlike Saruman, who sought to gather power and influence, Gandalf moved lightly through the world, always more interested in others than in himself. His wisdom and kindness made him a trusted friend to many, yet he seldom revealed the full extent of his knowledge or strength. During these early years, Gandalf established close ties with the Elves of Lothlórien and Rivendell, forging alliances that would later prove vital in the struggle against Sauron. But he also came to know and understand the simpler folk of Middle-earth, the quiet people of the Shire who lived far from the great kingdoms and battles. In them, he saw a purity and courage that would be essential in the dark days to come. As Sauron's power grew, it became clear that Middle-earth could not stand alone. The Valar's plan was to guide and unite the peoples of Middle-earth, but they would need to work together. Thus, the White Council was formed, bringing together the greatest minds and leaders of Middle-earth: Saruman the White, Galadriel of Lothlórien, Elrond of Rivendell, and Gandalf the Grey. Galadriel, wise beyond measure, recognized Gandalf's strength and urged him to lead the council. Yet Gandalf declined, knowing that true leadership came from unity, not authority. He saw that Saruman, though ambitious, could play a pivotal role in uniting the council, and so he stepped aside. But Gandalf would never stop watching, always wary of the corrupting influence of power, a lesson he knew all too well from his time in Valinor. And so, the White Council watched over Middle-earth, guarding against Sauron's return. Gandalf continued his quiet travels, never staying too long in one place, always moving like the smoke of his pipe, curling and disappearing into the air. He was a flicker of hope, a hint of strength hidden behind an old man's face. Yet Gandalf knew, deep within him, that darkness was growing, that Sauron would not remain hidden forever. Middle-earth would need more than the White Council. It would need heroes, and perhaps, it would need hobbits. Part 2. Gandalf the Grey, the first journey to Middle-earth. As time flowed through Middle-earth, Gandalf's quiet presence became woven into its fabric, his figure as familiar as the mist that rolled down the hills each morning. For countless years, he moved with a gentle purpose, gathering knowledge, forging alliances, and watching the unfolding lives of men, elves, dwarfs, and even hobbits. In this vast, sweeping land, Gandalf became known to many, yet fully understood by few. While others, like Saruman, sought places of influence, Gandalf's counsel was quiet and enduring, growing in significance, even if those he helped often forgot his face once he vanished into the horizon. Then, whispers began to grow louder. Word came of a dark power lurking in the southern reaches of Mirkwood, a figure known as the Necromancer, whose influence was slowly poisoning the forest. Once a beautiful stretch of land, Mirkwood was now a place of shadows and fear, and its people spoke of a sorcery that darkened the very air they breathed. It wasn't long before the Elves of Mirkwood, led by King Thranduil, noticed this change and sent word to those who could help. Rumors reached Rivendell, and Elrond called a meeting of the White Council, urging them to confront this evil presence. The White Council gathered for the first time in Rivendell, an assembly that included Elrond, the ancient lord of Rivendell, Galadriel, the wise lady of Lothlorien, and Saruman, the White Wizard. And in their midst stood Gandalf, grey-robed and unassuming but alert. While the others debated, Gandalf listened, his eyes sharp as he watched Saruman dismiss the rumors of the Necromancer, insisting it was nothing more than a minor threat. Yet Gandalf sensed something more. He knew too well that Middle-earth had a way of repeating its past, that evil seldom rested for long. And while Saruman dismissed the threat, Gandalf's unease grew. Years passed, and while the council did not act, Gandalf took it upon himself to investigate. He ventured into Mirkwood, moving quietly, observing the darkening shadows and listening to the fearful whispers of those who lived on the fringes of the forest. His suspicions were confirmed when he finally reached Dol Guldur, the stronghold where the Necromancer hid. There, he felt a presence so powerful and dark that it struck a chord deep within him. He left Mirkwood more certain than ever. This was no minor sorcerer, but a shadow that reached back to ancient times. Sauron, the servant of Morgoth, had returned. Returning to the White Council with his findings, Gandalf urged them to act, to drive the Necromancer from Dol Guldur. But Saruman, now the head of the council, downplayed the threat. Unknown to the others, Saruman had begun his own pursuit of power and control, coveting the secrets of Sauron's rings and hoping to use them for his own ends. As the years passed, Gandalf continued his solitary vigilance, watching over Middle-earth, even as his suspicions about Saruman grew. During this time, Gandalf found himself wandering through an unexpected corner of Middle-earth, the Shire. Here, in this gentle, peaceful land of rolling green hills and simple folk, Gandalf discovered a world untouched by war or ambition. Among the hobbits, he felt a rare warmth, an innocence that stood in stark contrast to the troubles of the outside world. These small, unassuming people, who cared more for family gatherings and harvests than for power, gave Gandalf a renewed sense of hope. And here, he would meet a hobbit who would one day change Middle-earth's fate, Bilbo Baggins. When Gandalf first met Bilbo, he saw in the hobbit a blend of curiosity and courage, qualities hidden beneath a simple, contented life. But Gandalf sensed that Bilbo was meant for something greater. So when he encountered Thorin Oakenshield, the determined dwarf prince seeking to reclaim his ancestral home of Erebor from the dragon Smaug, Gandalf knew he had found a purpose that would shape the lives of both Bilbo and Thorin. It was Gandalf who brought them together, planting the seed of a journey that would take them across Middle-earth and into the pages of legend. Their journey was not without peril. Along the way, Gandalf led Bilbo and the company of dwarfs through dark forests and towering mountains, facing dangers that would have turned lesser beings back. In a cave of trolls, Gandalf discovered Glamdring, the foe hammer, an ancient sword that would serve him well in the battles to come. And it was during this journey that Bilbo stumbled upon the One Ring, though none of them knew at the time the full weight of what he had found. When they reached Mirkwood, Gandalf left the company to attend once again to the growing shadow of Dol Guldur. He and the White Council mounted an assault on the fortress, driving Sauron from his stronghold in a show of unity and power. But it was a temporary victory. Sauron retreated to Mordor, where he could gather his forces and bide his time, and where he would soon rise again as the Dark Lord. The quest to reclaim Erebor ended in both triumph and tragedy. Smaug was defeated, but the victory came at a high cost. Thorin and his nephews fell in the Battle of Five Armies, a battle that saw elves, dwarfs, men, and even eagles unite against a common enemy. Gandalf fought alongside them, a figure of grey amid the chaos and bloodshed, and he felt the weight of each life lost. As he watched the last of Thorin's line fall, Gandalf understood the fragile balance between courage and fate, the razor's edge upon which all of Middle-earth now rested. Gandalf returned to the Shire with Bilbo, both changed by their journey. And though Bilbo resumed his quiet life, Gandalf knew that darkness still loomed. For many years, he continued his work, studying, gathering knowledge, and watching for signs of Sauron's return. He became a regular visitor to the Shire, and in time, he grew close to Bilbo's nephew, Frodo, sensing in him a gentleness and strength that reminded him of Bilbo. In the year 3001 of the Third Age, Gandalf returned to the Shire for Bilbo's 11th birthday. It was a grand celebration, full of laughter and warmth, and for a moment, it seemed as though peace had returned. But Gandalf's eyes were sharp, and he noticed something unsettling about Bilbo's behavior. The old hobbit was reluctant to part with a simple gold ring he called his precious, a ring that Gandalf suspected was far more than it appeared. After Bilbo left the Shire, entrusting the ring to Frodo, Gandalf began a long search for answers. He sought out ancient records, tracing the history of the One Ring and its connection to Sauron. His journey took him to Minas Tirith, where he pored over ancient texts and learned the truth. The ring in Frodo's possession was indeed the One Ring, the source of Sauron's power, and a weapon that could either save or destroy Middle-earth. But Gandalf was not the only one who knew of the ring's location. Sauron, too, had learned of it through Gollum, a twisted creature once a hobbit himself, who had been captured and tortured by the Dark Lord's servants. Now, Sauron's gaze turned toward the Shire, and Gandalf knew that Frodo's life was in grave danger. With urgency, Gandalf returned to the Shire and warned Frodo of the ring's true nature. He instructed him to leave, to set out for Rivendell, where they would find allies in Elrond and the Elves. But Gandalf could not accompany him immediately, for he needed to consult with Saruman, hoping that his old ally would stand with him against Sauron. It was a bitter revelation when Gandalf arrived at Isengard and found himself a prisoner of Saruman, who had betrayed the White Council and allied himself with Sauron in his pursuit of the One Ring. Trapped atop the Dark Tower of Orthanc, Gandalf faced a moment of despair, but he was not without hope. The great eagle Gwaihir came to his aid, carrying him from the tower and setting him free to warn Frodo once again. And so began Gandalf's race across Middle-earth, riding with all speed on Shadowfax, the swiftest horse of Rohan, to Rivendell. Along the way, he encountered agents of Sauron, the fearsome Nazgul, and clashed with them atop the windswept hill of Weathertop. Though wounded and weary, Gandalf pressed on, driven by his determination to reach Frodo and protect him from the dangers that pursued him. At last, Gandalf reached Rivendell, where Elrond had called a council to decide the fate of the ring. There, among elves, dwarfs, and men, Gandalf revealed the full extent of Sauron's power and the peril that lay ahead. It was in Rivendell that the Fellowship of the Ring was formed, a company of 9 who would bear the ring to the fires of Mount Doom. And so, with a heavy heart and a steadfast resolve, Gandalf set out with Frodo, Aragorn, and the others, knowing that their journey would lead them through the darkest depths of Middle-earth, into the very heart of Mordor itself. Part 3. The Quest in Erebor, an adventure with the Dwarves. As Gandalf and the newly formed Fellowship of the Ring prepared to leave Rivendell, a quiet resolve settled over each of them. They knew what lay ahead was a journey unlike any other, a path fraught with shadows and the threat of death at every turn. But Gandalf understood that there was no other choice. The One Ring had to be destroyed, or all of Middle-earth would fall to darkness. Their departure was shrouded in silence as they left the safety of Rivendell and ventured into the wilderness. Gandalf led the Fellowship with a steady hand, guiding Frodo, Aragorn, Legolas, Gimli, Boromir, and the hobbits Sam, Merry, and Pippin through treacherous terrain. As they marched, Gandalf could sense the heavy weight of Frodo's burden. The ring's power was already tugging at him, whispering to his mind, luring him with its ancient promise of dominion. Gandalf kept a close watch, knowing too well the ring's corrupting influence. Their first major challenge came as they approached Caradhras, the great mountain that loomed high and menacing in the wintry skies. Gandalf had hoped that they could cross over the mountain pass, bypassing the darker paths below, but Caradhras resisted them. As they climbed, an unnatural storm descended, blinding them with snow and ice. It was as if the mountain itself was pushing them back, a cold hand reaching out to thwart their efforts. With each step, the blizzard grew more intense, until the path became impassable. Finally, Gandalf conceded that they could not continue this way. They would need to take a more dangerous route. It was here, standing in the cold shadow of Caradhras, that Gandalf made a fateful decision. He knew of another way beneath the mountains, a dark and ancient path known as Moria, the dwarven realm lost to darkness. Long ago, Moria had been a thriving kingdom, rich in mithril and renowned for its craftsmanship, but it had since been abandoned, a tomb haunted by shadows. The dwarfs of old had delved too deeply into the mountains, awakening a darkness they could not conquer. Though reluctant, Gandalf led the Fellowship down into Moria, knowing that their survival now depended on facing whatever lay below. The entrance to Moria was hidden, an ancient gate sealed by elvish runes that only Gandalf could decipher. He spoke the words of friendship that would unlock the door, and as it creaked open, the darkness of Moria yawned before them, silent and vast. The air was thick, stale, and heavy with a sense of foreboding. As they descended, the light of day faded behind them, and shadows closed in. Gandalf lit his staff, casting a pale glow in the blackness, but even this seemed feeble against the overwhelming silence of Moria. Step by step, they moved deeper into the forgotten halls, past crumbling pillars and vast, empty chambers where echoes of ancient battles still lingered. The hobbits clung close to one another, their faces pale with fear. Yet Gandalf pressed forward, his mind keenly aware of what might lurk within these depths. Though he said little to the others, he knew well that Moria was not entirely abandoned. There was something old and terrible waiting in the darkness, something that had slept for centuries. Their fears were soon confirmed when they stumbled upon the tomb of Balin, one of the dwarfs who had attempted to reclaim Moria. His grave was a silent testament to the horrors that had befallen those who dared to venture here. As they lingered in the silent room, a shadow stirred in the distance, a noise, faint at first, but growing louder, the sound of drums echoing through the stone corridors. "Drums, drums in the deep," Gandalf murmured, his face grim. He knew what was coming. Without warning, a swarm of orcs descended upon them, their harsh cries filling the air as they clashed with the Fellowship. In a fierce battle, Gandalf wielded his staff and sword, his movement swift and precise, fending off the attackers as they fought their way through the narrow passages. But as the battle raged, a greater threat revealed itself, a creature of flame and shadow, older than the darkness of Moria itself. The Balrog of Morgoth, a being of ancient power that had slumbered for ages, had awoken. The Fellowship fled, racing through the halls with the Balrog close behind. Its presence was overwhelming, a force of pure malevolence and fire that consumed everything in its path. As they reached the bridge of Khazad-dûm, Gandalf knew there was only one way to ensure the others could escape. He turned to face the Balrog, planting himself firmly between the creature and his friends. With his staff raised high, he shouted, "You cannot pass!" The Balrog lunged, its fiery whip crackling in the air as it struck at Gandalf. With a mighty blow, Gandalf shattered the bridge beneath the creature's feet, sending it plummeting into the abyss. But as it fell, the Balrog's whip lashed out, wrapping around Gandalf's ankle and dragging him down with it. The Fellowship watched in horror as Gandalf disappeared into the darkness, his final words echoing in their ears, "Fly, you fools." For what seemed like an eternity, Gandalf fell, plunging into the depths of Moria alongside the Balrog. In the cold darkness, they battled, their clash a storm of fire and shadow. They fought through the underground chasms, their struggle carrying them up to the peak of the mountain itself. It was there, on the high slopes of Ziraxigil, that Gandalf dealt the final blow, casting down the Balrog and collapsing from sheer exhaustion. But Gandalf's journey did not end there. His spirit passed beyond the world, leaving behind the mortal realm. Yet he was not destined to fade. The Valar, recognizing his unwavering commitment to Middle-earth, returned him to life, transforming him from Gandalf the Grey to Gandalf the White, a being of even greater power and wisdom. With a renewed sense of purpose, Gandalf returned to Middle-earth, more determined than ever to see Sauron's defeat. He awoke in the forests of Lothlorien, where Galadriel and her elves tended to his wounds and gifted him a new staff, a symbol of his rebirth. The light that now radiated from him was unmistakable. He had become a figure of legend, a beacon of hope for all who opposed the darkness. Gandalf knew he could not waste time. The shadow over Middle-earth was growing, and Saruman's betrayal had left Rohan vulnerable to Sauron's forces. Without delay, he set out to aid the kingdom of Rohan. Upon arriving at Edoras, Gandalf found King Theoden under the influence of Grima Wormtongue, a servant of Saruman who had poisoned the king's mind with deceit. Theoden had grown weak and indifferent, his spirit dulled by Wormtongue's manipulation. But Gandalf, wielding his newfound power, freed Theoden from this influence, awakening the king to his former strength and resolve. Rohan would not fall without a fight. With Theoden restored, Gandalf urged him to rally his people and prepare for war. Yet the danger was already upon them. Saruman's forces, a vast army of orcs and wild men, had begun their march toward Helm's Deep, the last stronghold of Rohan. Knowing the stakes, Gandalf rode out to gather reinforcements, calling upon the scattered forces of Rohan to join in the defense. The battle that followed was fierce and relentless. As the forces of Rohan clashed with Saruman's army, the walls of Helm's Deep shook with the impact of the assault. Just as hope seemed lost, Gandalf returned at dawn, leading the riders of Rohan in a charge that shattered the enemy's ranks. His arrival turned the tide, driving Saruman's forces into retreat and securing a hard-won victory. But Gandalf knew this was only the beginning. The shadow of Sauron loomed larger than ever, and the strength of men alone would not be enough to hold him back. Middle-earth needed a united front, a rallying of all free peoples if they were to stand a chance. With Theoden's forces secured, Gandalf turned his attention to Gondor, the last great kingdom of men. In Minas Tirith, the White City, Gandalf found a kingdom on the brink of despair. Denethor, the steward of Gondor, had fallen into madness, consumed by fear and grief over his son's death and the power of Sauron. The people looked to Gandalf for leadership, and he took up the mantle, guiding the city's defenses and rallying its soldiers as Sauron's armies bore down upon them. The Battle of Pelennor Fields was one of epic proportions, a clash of light and darkness that echoed across the plains of Gondor. Gandalf fought valiantly, leading the charge against the forces of Mordor and facing down the Witch King of Angmar, Sauron's most fearsome servant. Though the Witch King ultimately met his end at the hands of Eowyn and Merry, it was Gandalf's presence that kept the city's defenders from breaking. When the battle was over, Gandalf knew that one final push was needed. Sauron's gaze had to be diverted, allowing Frodo a chance to reach Mount Doom. And so, Gandalf led the remaining forces of Gondor and Rohan to the Black Gate of Mordor, challenging Sauron openly. It was a desperate gambit, but it worked. As Frodo destroyed the ring, Sauron's power was broken, his fortress crumbled, and Middle-earth was saved. With the darkness lifted, Gandalf returned to Minas Tirith to witness the coronation of Aragorn as King of Gondor, fulfilling a destiny long in the making. Gandalf, having completed his mission, took one last journey to the Shire to bid farewell to his beloved hobbits. Then, on a quiet morning, he departed from the Grey Havens, sailing west with Frodo, Bilbo, and the last of the Elves, returning to the lands beyond. Thus, Gandalf's story came full circle, from a humble mire to the White Wizard, a guardian who had preserved Middle-earth from the greatest of evils. In the aftermath of Sauron's defeat in 3019 of the Third Age, a rare stillness settled across Middle-earth. For the first time in ages, a peace descended that had been paid for with sacrifice, courage, and the unity of all free peoples. Gandalf, who had once wandered as a humble grey pilgrim, stood beside the newly crowned King Elessar, Aragorn, son of Arathorn. Together, they looked out over Minas Tirith, the White City, now bathed in the light of dawn. The city gleamed with renewed strength, and Gandalf felt a deep satisfaction. Here, at last, was the kingdom restored, its future secured, a vision he had carried with him since his arrival in Middle-earth so many centuries before. Yet for Gandalf, the victory came with a bittersweet realization. His purpose, that ancient duty entrusted to him by the Valar, was now complete. The era of the Astari, those 5 wizards sent from Valinor to aid Middle-earth, was ending. Middle-earth no longer needed guardians like him. The new age belonged to men and to the leaders who would rebuild and reshape the world. He, Gandalf, had helped guide them to this threshold, but he knew his time in Middle-earth was coming to an end. Part 4. Life in the Shire and uncovering the secret of the ring. The coronation of King Elessar in 3019 marked the beginning of the Fourth Age. For Gandalf, this was a moment of profound joy, yet it also signaled the closing of a chapter that had begun with a quiet Mire named Olórin, long ago in the timeless lands of Valinor. When he had first arrived in Middle-earth, bearing only his staff and a mission, Gandalf could scarcely have imagined the depth of the bonds he would forge, the battles he would fight, or the lives he would touch. Aragorn's coronation was not only a victory over darkness, but a testament to those bonds, to the alliances that had been nurtured through trials and hardship. Gandalf took comfort in entrusting the care of Middle-earth to Aragorn. The strength, compassion, and wisdom he had witnessed in Aragorn reassured him that the kingdom was in safe hands. But his journey was not yet finished. There was still one last farewell to make. He traveled back to the Shire, that quiet, unassuming land where his adventures in Middle-earth had truly begun. Here, in 2941, he had first met Bilbo Baggins, a hobbit with an unexpected spirit for adventure, a hobbit who would change the course of history. It had been Gandalf who had seen the potential in Bilbo, sensing something remarkable beneath his simple, rustic life. And it was in the Shire that Gandalf had found something truly special, a purity, a love for peace and simplicity that made Middle-earth worth saving. His connection to the hobbits had only deepened over time, culminating in his friendship with Frodo, Sam, Merry, and Pippin. When he arrived in the Shire this final time, he was overjoyed to see the hobbits safe and back in their homeland, the memories of war already beginning to fade. The scars would heal, as would the land. The Shire was resilient, just like its people. But as he spent these last days among his hobbit friends, Gandalf could not ignore the shadow that still haunted Frodo. The One Ring had taken its toll, leaving Frodo changed in ways that only Gandalf, too touched by the burdens of Middle-earth, could truly understand. While the world had been saved, Frodo bore an invisible mark that would never entirely fade. Gandalf knew that Frodo, like himself, was destined for a different kind of peace, a peace that could only be found beyond the shores of Middle-earth. When the time came for Gandalf to depart, he gathered with Frodo, Bilbo, and the elves who had also chosen to leave Middle-earth. Together, they made their way to the Grey Havens, the final port on the western shores. This was no ordinary journey, for they were bound for Valinor, the undying lands, a place of rest beyond the reach of sorrow and shadow. Here, on the morning of September 29, 3021, Gandalf bade farewell to Middle-earth, his heart filled with both sadness and peace. He had walked these lands for over 2,000 years, a quiet guide, a friend, a guardian. Now, as he boarded the ship, he felt the weight of every memory, every life he had touched, every battle fought and won. As they sailed away, Gandalf looked back one last time at the fading shores of Middle-earth. He thought of the lives that would flourish in the peace he had helped secure, of Aragorn ruling in Gondor, of the free peoples rebuilding, of the hobbits tending their fields. It was a farewell steeped in hope, for he knew that Middle-earth would endure, shaped by the courage, sacrifice, and wisdom of those who had fought to protect it. Thus ended the journey of Gandalf, the grey pilgrim who became Gandalf the White, a timeless hero who had preserved Middle-earth through courage, compassion, and steadfast resolve. And as he returned to the land of his origins, the memory of Middle-earth, and all those he had loved within it, remained forever in his heart. Part 5. The War Begins, the Fellowship of the Ring. As the ship bearing Gandalf, Frodo, Bilbo, and their elven companions sailed farther from Middle-earth, the familiar shores receded into a mist that softened their final sight. Gandalf stood at the ship's bow, the sea wind ruffling his white robes, and let his thoughts drift back over the ages he had spent in Middle-earth. Every step he had taken, every bond he had formed, and every sacrifice made now seemed like moments captured in memory's delicate threads. When Gandalf first set foot in Middle-earth, he had arrived under the humble guise of Gandalf the Grey. He had known from the start that he would not wield his power openly, for his purpose was to guide and inspire, to stir hope in the hearts of others rather than to command them. Those early years, when he wandered as a simple traveler, were filled with quiet observations, moments of shared wisdom with elves, men, and dwarves. He had walked in the forests of Olórin, strolled the paths of Rivendell, and ventured through the vast lands of Rohan and Gondor, learning their stories, sharing in their dreams, and coming to know Middle-earth as both a world of beauty and hardship. Now, as he returned to the lands of the West, he remembered those he had lost along the way, friends like Thorin Oakenshield, who had fallen at the Battle of the Five Armies in 2941, Boromir, who had sacrificed himself to protect the Hobbits, and the countless unnamed souls who had given their lives in the struggle against Sauron. Gandalf had carried their memories with him, each a testament to the courage that Middle-earth could muster even in its darkest hours. The ship sailed on, crossing the seas that lay between Middle-earth and the blessed lands of Aman. Gandalf felt a familiar presence calling him, a sense of homecoming mixed with the understanding that he had forever changed. For centuries, he had been Olórin, a Mire of Valinor, a spirit of compassion who had walked among the Valar, learning from them in the days before his mission. But after his time in Middle-earth, he was no longer the same. He carried with him the burdens and lessons of an entire age. In those early days, before the mission of the Istari began, he had served under Manwë and Nienna in the peaceful realm of Valinor. Manwë had chosen him for his humility, his quiet strength, and his unshakable resolve, traits that would be essential in the task that lay ahead. It was Nienna, the Lady of Sorrow and Compassion, who had taught him the importance of empathy, a lesson that would shape every decision he made in Middle-earth. The strength to mourn with others, to lift them even when they despaired, was a power unlike any other, and it had become a guiding force in Gandalf's actions. When the ship finally drew near to the shores of Valinor, Gandalf felt an overwhelming sense of peace. He had come full circle, returning to the land where his journey had first begun. But Valinor now seemed different to him, as though it, too, had been transformed by his experiences. The white shores were as beautiful and timeless as ever, and the air held a sense of purity, untainted by the sorrows of the mortal world. But Gandalf knew that he was bringing a part of Middle-earth with him, a part of himself that would never truly leave. On the shores of Aman, he was welcomed by the other Maiar and the Valar, his old friends and mentors who had watched over him from afar. He was no longer Gandalf the Grey or even Gandalf the White. He was once again Olórin, yet he felt a kinship with Middle-earth that could never be undone. The Valar saw this in him, in his eyes, which held the sorrow of countless losses, but also the warmth of friendships forged in the fires of adversity. The Lady Nienna was among those who greeted him, her presence as comforting as it had been in the days of his youth. She gazed upon him with deep compassion, understanding the weight he carried. Gandalf felt as if he was once again her pupil, learning anew the depth of empathy, for he could now see in Nienna's gaze the same understanding he had carried in Middle-earth. She recognized his weariness, his grief, but also the quiet joy that came from having fulfilled his purpose. It was she who offered him the final comfort, acknowledging his struggles, his triumphs, and the peace he had brought to Middle-earth. As the days passed, Gandalf began to settle back into the rhythm of Valinor, yet he could feel the echoes of Middle-earth within him, memories of long roads traveled and the faces of those he had loved and left behind. He would often walk alone along the white shores, gazing out across the sea, letting his thoughts drift back to the Fellowship. Frodo and Bilbo, who had journeyed with him to these lands, had also found peace, their lives in Middle-earth ending in a place of rest. Gandalf took comfort in knowing that they, too, had finally found a haven, far from the shadows that had once darkened their paths. But even as he rested, Gandalf understood that his journey in Middle-earth had not ended with his departure. The legacy of his actions, the friendships he had forged, and the hope he had inspired would endure. Aragorn would lead Gondor with wisdom and compassion, Samwise Gamgee would carry on in the Shire, his heart full of the courage he had shown on the journey to Mordor. And Middle-earth itself would remember Gandalf not as an immortal Maiar, but as the grey pilgrim who had walked among them, a guide and friend who had fought not for power but for peace. In Valinor, Gandalf spent his days in quiet contemplation, reflecting on the lessons he had learned in Middle-earth. He saw now that his greatest power had not been his staff or his magic, but the ability to inspire others, to awaken in them the courage to stand against the darkness. His journey had been one of compassion, of hope, of quietly showing others the strength they already possessed. It was this understanding that filled him with a lasting sense of purpose, a certainty that he had completed what he was meant to do. Though he had returned to a land where time held no sway, Gandalf carried with him the memory of every moment spent in Middle-earth. Each memory was like a star in the night sky, a light in the darkness, a testament to the strength of the free peoples. And he knew that, though he had departed, Middle-earth would forever be a part of him, as he was a part of its story. He had been a guardian, a wanderer, a friend, and a guide, and his journey would live on in the hearts and minds of those he had touched. In the timeless lands of Valinor, Gandalf, once Olórin, walked among the Valar, forever changed. The grey pilgrim who had traversed Middle-earth, fought its darkest evils, and inspired its bravest souls, had finally found rest. But his story, his legacy, would endure across ages, whispered among elves, recounted by men, and forever remembered by the hobbits who would pass his tales down through generations. And so, though his journey had ended, Gandalf's spirit, his wisdom, and his kindness would live on, echoing through the lands he had saved. The legend of Gandalf the Grey, Gandalf the White, would forever be a light against the shadow, a reminder of the power of hope, courage, and compassion in a world once darkened by the greatest of evils. Part 6. The journey through Moria and the battle with the Balrog. As Gandalf's ship sailed further from the shores of Middle-earth, his legacy began to take root across the land he had left behind. The Fourth Age dawned, and though Gandalf was no longer present, his influence lingered, like a guiding light that continued to illuminate the path forward. His friends, allies, and those he had inspired would carry his memory in their hearts, passing down the tales of his wisdom and courage. In Gondor, under the rule of King Aragorn the Lesser, the white city of Minas Tirith flourished as a beacon of strength and peace. Aragorn often walked among his people, ruling with compassion and humility, much like Gandalf had done throughout his journey. He embodied the values Gandalf had upheld, values learned not only from his bloodline but from the wizard who had seen his potential long before he wore a crown. The people of Gondor would sometimes see their king pause in quiet reflection, as though listening to the echoes of an old friend's advice. Though Gandalf had departed, his counsel remained alive in Aragorn's decisions, his empathy, and his vision for a united Middle-earth. Meanwhile, in the Shire, the hobbits who had journeyed with Gandalf, Frodo, Sam, Merry, and Pippin, returned to a world almost untouched by the shadows they had fought. For a time, it seemed as if life could return to the simple, peaceful existence they had once known. Yet, those who had known Gandalf sensed his presence even in the familiar quiet of their homeland. Samwise Gamgee, in particular, held close the memory of Gandalf's kindness and guidance. As he took on the responsibilities of family, land, and community, Sam carried with him the courage he had learned from Gandalf and the Fellowship. Sam would eventually become the mayor of Hobbiton, and his leadership reflected the gentle wisdom that Gandalf had instilled in him. Under Sam's care, the Shire flourished, and he made sure that the tales of their journey, and of Gandalf's role in it, were never forgotten. He passed down these stories to his children and grandchildren, ensuring that the Grey Wizard who had once set their feet on a path of courage and friendship would be remembered long after the end of their own days. Over time, tales of Gandalf grew among the hobbits, becoming legends shared by firesides and in quiet gatherings. To most hobbits, Gandalf was remembered not as a warrior or a wizard, but as a friend, a mysterious yet comforting figure who had believed in them when no one else did. The hobbits who hadn't known him personally still told stories of his fireworks, his laughter, and the quiet strength he had shown as he fought to protect them all. In the forests of Lothlorien and Rivendell, the Elves, too, spoke of Gandalf. They remembered him not only as the wise grey pilgrim who had walked among them, but as a Maia who had sacrificed so much of himself for the sake of Middle-earth. Galadriel, the Lady of Lothlorien, felt his absence deeply. She had seen Gandalf's potential long before he became Gandalf the White, understanding that his strength lay not in power, but in his heart. She spoke of him to those who remained in Middle-earth, recounting the times he had stood between them and the darkness, a reminder that even the humblest among them could change the course of history. Elrond of Rivendell, too, kept Gandalf's memory alive. Though Rivendell was a land of ancient wisdom and deep-rooted history, the passing of the Grey Wizard marked a shift in the world Elrond had known. The Fellowship had brought hope to Middle-earth, and Gandalf had been the force that united them. Elrond would often speak of Gandalf in his teachings, passing on the knowledge and the courage he had embodied. Even as Rivendell itself faded with the departure of the Elves, Gandalf's influence lived on in the stories Elrond shared, stories that would eventually reach the ears of those men and elves who chose to remain in Middle-earth. In Rohan, King Ema, who had fought alongside Gandalf during the war, honored the wizard's memory in his rule. He ruled with courage and loyalty, honoring the legacy of Theoden, who had been freed from Saruman's influence by Gandalf's intervention. Ema remembered Gandalf as a symbol of truth and justice, someone who had risked all to protect those he loved. Under Ema's reign, Rohan rebuilt its cities and formed alliances that would safeguard its people for generations. In his heart, Ema knew that Gandalf's presence, his actions, had been a turning point in Rohan's history, a spark that had saved their land from destruction. As the Fourth Age progressed, Gandalf's story became woven into the tapestry of Middle-earth as lore. Those who had known him firsthand passed on their knowledge to their children and to those who would one day take their place. Over the years, the details of Gandalf's journey with the Fellowship, his battles against Sauron, and his final departure from Middle-earth became cherished tales, stories of courage and wisdom that inspired all who heard them. In the towns and cities of men, Gandalf was remembered as the White Rider, the one who had come with power and compassion to protect them from the forces of Mordor. His image became a symbol of resilience, a reminder that, no matter how great the darkness, there would always be those who stood against it. Monuments were built in his honor, and in some places, he was revered almost as a legend, a figure who, though now gone, had once walked among them, fighting for peace. The legacy of Gandalf endured not only in these tales and memories, but also in the changes he had helped bring about. Middle-earth was transformed by his guidance, united by the strength of alliances he had forged. His spirit lived on in the hearts of those who sought justice, kindness, and courage, in every ruler who took his lessons to heart, and in every friendship that bridged the divides of race, culture, and land. Even in Valinor, Gandalf was aware of the enduring impact of his actions. As Olórin, he would walk the tranquil lands of a man, a part of him always turned back toward Middle-earth, carrying with him the memory of those he had loved, protected, and inspired. Though he was no longer among them, he knew that his influence would ripple through the ages, a quiet strength passed down through generations. And so, the tale of Gandalf the Grey, who became Gandalf the White, lived on. His legacy was a testament to the power of compassion, the strength of unity, and the courage to face the darkest trials. Middle-earth was forever changed by his presence, and his story would be told for generations to come, ensuring that the light he had sparked would never fade. Thus ended the legend of Gandalf, the humble pilgrim who had journeyed across Middle-earth, shaping its destiny with each step, each word, and each act of bravery. Though he had returned to Valinor, his spirit remained forever intertwined with the land he had loved and protected, a legacy that would stand as long as Middle-earth itself endured. Part 7. Gandalf the White, Supreme Messenger of the Valar. As the years turned into centuries, Gandalf's story grew to become a cherished myth in Middle-earth. Though the details faded and blurred with each retelling, the essence of Gandalf's legacy became a guiding light, a symbol of strength and wisdom in the hearts of men, elves, dwarfs, and hobbits alike. His life and deeds transformed from recent memory to legend, woven into the very fabric of Middle-earth's culture. In Gondor, the lineage of kings who descended from Aragorn and Arwen carried forward Gandalf's values. They ruled with a deep sense of justice and compassion, ideals that had been inspired by the wizard who had stood beside Aragorn during the darkest times. Songs and ballads commemorated the great deeds of the Fellowship, with Gandalf's part celebrated in solemn melodies that echoed through the halls of Minas Tirith. His likeness was carved into stone statues throughout the city, often depicted with his staff and a gentle expression that reminded those who passed of his wisdom and kindness. In the smaller villages of Rohan, Gandalf's memory lived on as tales shared around the fire. To the people of Rohan, Gandalf was both a mythic figure and a real friend. They spoke of the mysterious grey pilgrim who had liberated King Theoden from Saruman's shadow and who had returned at dawn to lead the charge at Helm's Deep. His figure became a guardian spirit in their stories, a symbol of loyalty and courage that helped to shape the chivalric code of Rohan's riders. Children grew up hearing tales of Gandalf's bravery, his dedication to protecting the weak, and his commitment to preserving the land. In the Shire, Gandalf's story was remembered with a unique fondness. The Hobbits knew him as the kindly old wizard who brought fireworks and stories, but the few who had traveled with him knew he had been much more than that. Samwise Gamgee, who lived a long and full life, ensured that Gandalf's memory was passed on to his children and grandchildren, sharing stories of the wise, grey-bearded friend who had helped protect the Shire from evils they could barely imagine. The Hobbits honored Gandalf with simple, heartfelt gestures, gatherings in his memory, songs sung in his honor, and tales of courage inspired by his belief in the resilience of even the smallest among them. In time, the Hobbits who had journeyed with him, Frodo, Sam, Merry, and Pippin became stories themselves, their adventures told as a saga intertwined with the story of Gandalf. As generations passed, these tales blurred into fable, with Gandalf the Grey appearing not just as a wizard but as a symbol of mystery, magic, and enduring hope. In the long-lived realms of the Elves, where memory was preserved like a precious gem, Gandalf's deeds were honored and remembered in their true detail. The Elves of Rivendell and Lothlorien spoke often of the Maya Olórin, who had come to Middle-earth not to rule, but to serve. Galadriel, who remembered Gandalf with deep respect, often spoke of him as the kindler of hearts, one who had awakened hope when despair seemed certain. Even as the Elves themselves began to leave Middle-earth, they carried with them the stories of Gandalf to the shores of Aman, ensuring that the memory of his sacrifices would live on in Valinor as well. In Rivendell, where law was kept with utmost care, Gandalf was honored as the unifier of the free peoples, the one who had brought together elves, dwarfs, men, and hobbits. His name was inscribed in the histories of the elves, a testament to his role in the War of the Ring. Even as Rivendell began to fade, its libraries and halls silent, the knowledge of Gandalf's deeds became a part of Middle-earth's immortal lore. In distant lands, where travelers brought stories from afar, Gandalf became more than a name. He became a mythic archetype, an emblem of wisdom, courage, and the quiet strength to guide others without seeking dominion. In the minds of the people, Gandalf the Grey evolved into something timeless, almost elemental, a spirit of guidance, the wise old traveler who appeared at times of great need to offer counsel, protection, and light. In time, even Valinor, the blessed realm, became familiar with the tales of Gandalf. The elves who returned from Middle-earth spoke of him, and in their retellings, the Maya Olórin who had left Valinor as a humble messenger was known now as a hero, a guardian who had saved Middle-earth. Those who had known him before his journey to Middle-earth could see the transformation in him, a change woven into his very being. He had left as Olórin, and he returned as Gandalf the White, a figure forever touched by the people, lands, and struggles of Middle-earth. As ages passed and Middle-earth continued to change, Gandalf's story remained, whispered among the stars in the vast night skies, remembered by those who had loved him, and kept alive in the values he had instilled. His life's work, though he never sought power, left an indelible mark on Middle-earth, a legacy woven into the courage and compassion that endured long after his departure. The Grey Pilgrim, the White Rider, Gandalf the Wise, each name, each role, became part of a story that would inspire generations. His presence had brought light to the darkest corners of Middle-earth, a flame that continued to burn in the hearts of all who heard his story. And thus, the memory of Gandalf lived on, an enduring reminder of the quiet power of wisdom, the strength of compassion, and the belief that even the smallest acts of courage could change the course of history. Part 8. The final battle with Sauron. As Gandalf's journey reached its true end in Valinor, he felt the quiet peace of Aman settle upon him. The timeless beauty of the blessed realm, untouched by the turmoil and sorrow of Middle-earth, greeted him with a profound sense of homecoming. Yet, as he walked once again among the Maya and Valar, it became clear that he was not the same as when he had left. The Grey Pilgrim had returned, but he carried with him the colors, memories, and emotions of Middle-earth, experiences that even the immortal lands could not diminish. In the tranquil groves of Lórien, Gandalf spent time with Urmo and Nienna, the two Valar who had guided him in his early days. Nienna, the Lady of Mourning and Compassion, welcomed him back with a deep understanding in her gaze. Though Gandalf had left as Olórin, humble and uncertain, he had returned with a wisdom only earned through hardship, a wisdom born of compassion, struggle, and sacrifice. Nienna saw in him the lessons he had learned through the pain and beauty of Middle-earth and understood that he had grown beyond the role of an ordinary Maya. As they walked together, Nienna listened as Gandalf recounted the struggles he had witnessed, the courage of the Fellowship, the resilience of the free peoples, and the loyalty of the Hobbits. She seemed deeply moved by Gandalf's story of the Hobbits, those small and humble beings who had risen to save Middle-earth. To Nienna, Gandalf's bond with the Hobbits was a testament to the very ideals she cherished, and she could see that Gandalf's own compassion had flourished in his connection with them. In Middle-earth, Gandalf had learned that true strength was not measured by power, but by kindness and the ability to inspire others, even the smallest of folk, to become heroes in their own right. The Valar themselves were not untouched by Gandalf's tales. Manwë, the High King of Arda, saw in Gandalf's experiences a confirmation of the need for the free peoples to chart their own destiny. He recognized the strength of men, elves, and dwarfs, each rising to the challenge set before them, showing unity and bravery without direct intervention from the Valar. Gandalf's tales confirmed to Manwë that Middle-earth was truly ready to be governed by its own strength, and his heart filled with a new pride for the beings they had long ago set free to govern their own lands. Yavanna, the Lady of the Earth, also took comfort in Gandalf's stories. As the one who had created the Ents to protect her forests, Yavanna was especially moved by Gandalf's description of the Ents' march against Saruman at Isengard. Hearing of their fierce loyalty to the natural world and the lengths to which they went to defend it, she saw the deep respect that Middle-earth held for her creations. Gandalf's journey reminded her of the resilience of her creatures and the balance that had been restored to the lands. To Yavanna, Gandalf's stories of the Shire, with its gardens and rolling hills, became a symbol of what she had always hoped Middle-earth could be, a place of harmony between the free peoples and the land. During his time in Valinor, Gandalf also reunited with those who had known him before he became the Grey Pilgrim. Many of the Maiar had watched his journey with curiosity and reverence, wondering how Olórin, who had once walked so quietly in a man, had taken on such a monumental task. They gathered around him, listening as he recounted the rise and fall of Sauron, the courage of the Fellowship, and the sacrifices made along the way. To them, Gandalf was no longer just a Maiar, he had become a figure of legend, embodying the very spirit of Middle-earth. As he spent time in Aman, Gandalf found moments of reflection, times where he walked alone along the white shores, gazing out across the sea toward Middle-earth. The memories of his friends, Aragorn, Frodo, Bilbo, and all the others, remained vivid, reminders of the bonds that had shaped him. Though he now lived among the undying, Gandalf knew that a part of him would always belong to Middle-earth, bound to the places, people, and ideals that he had fought to protect. Gandalf's heart was filled with both peace and longing. Valinor was as beautiful as he remembered, a land of light, song, and eternal tranquility. Yet it was in Middle-earth, with all its flaws, struggles, and imperfect beauty, that he had found his truest purpose. He had seen despair and hope, darkness and light, and he had come to cherish the resilience that grew from the struggle to protect these fleeting things. Even as he settled into the timeless realm, he felt a quiet joy in knowing that his work had helped Middle-earth become a place where the free peoples could thrive on their own. As time passed, the tales Gandalf shared became part of Valinor's lore. The elves who returned from Middle-earth carried with them stories of his bravery and wisdom, stories that spread among the Maiar and Valar. Gandalf's journey was a reminder to them all that Middle-earth was not just a distant land, it was a place of incredible beauty, worth fighting for, a world where even the smallest beings could stand against the greatest evils. The Valar and Maiar saw Gandalf's journey as proof of the power of compassion, and they honored him as one who had transcended the ordinary bounds of their kind. In these quiet reflections, Gandalf found his final peace. Though he had once feared that he lacked the strength for his mission, he now saw that his journey had been one of growth, courage, and humility. His purpose had never been to lead through dominance, but to inspire, to draw out the strength within others, so that they might stand against the darkness themselves. And it was this legacy, a legacy of hope, courage, and compassion, that he had left behind in Middle-earth. From that time forward, Gandalf's name became a quiet but enduring symbol in Valinor, a testament to the timeless values of resilience, kindness, and unity. He was no longer just Olórin, he was Gandalf, a guardian of both Valinor and Middle-earth, a bridge between worlds whose spirit would live on as long as the stars shone above the land. And so, as the ages turned in Valinor, Gandalf's story became a cherished part of a man's own lore. The light he had brought to Middle-earth was mirrored in the peaceful shores of Valinor, a reminder that even the simplest acts of courage could ripple across worlds. Though he now walked in peace, his spirit remained connected to Middle-earth, forever a guiding star in the hearts of those who sought hope in times of darkness. Part 9. Completing the mission and returning to the Undying Lands. As the Fourth Age of Middle-earth unfolded, Gandalf's legacy deepened, embedding itself into the very heart of the land he had once called home. The deeds of Gandalf the Grey and Gandalf the White became the cherished tales of kingdoms, the lessons of scholars, and the songs of travelers. With each passing generation, his name grew into a symbol of enduring wisdom, resilience, and hope. In Gondor, King Aragorn established a golden age of peace and prosperity. The white tree blossomed in Minas Tirith, a living symbol of the renewal that Gandalf had helped bring to the kingdom. The Tower of Ithilien, once Gandalf's refuge in times of council, stood as a watchtower over the White City, bearing his memory with quiet strength. Aragorn and his descendants ruled with compassion, humility, and respect for all races, qualities Gandalf had modeled. Every king who took the throne in Gondor knew of the White Wizard who had fought to preserve their lands, and who had believed in the power of good even when hope seemed lost. In Rohan, King Ema and his descendants told stories of the Grey Pilgrim who had come to their aid in their darkest hour. Around fires and feasts, Rohirrim riders shared tales of the mysterious wizard who had freed Theoden from Saruman's spell, leading them in battle and returning at dawn to save Helm's Deep. Gandalf's memory became interwoven with the courage and valor of Rohan, an inspiration for all who sought to defend their land with loyalty and honor. In the Shire, Gandalf's name became almost legendary. He was remembered not as a mighty wizard, but as a kindly old friend who brought magic and fireworks. The hobbits who had journeyed with him, Frodo, Sam, Merry, and Pippin, became legends in their own right, their stories passed down as a blend of adventure and fable. Samwise Gamgee, who served as mayor of Hobbiton for many years, ensured that Gandalf's legacy would never fade from the memory of the Shire. Tales of Gandalf's wisdom and kindness, as well as his occasional sternness, were told as bedtime stories, each one serving as a reminder that even the smallest people could do great deeds. In the land of the Elves, Gandalf's legacy lived on in the fading cities of Rivendell and Lothlorien. The Elves remembered him as Olórin, the Maya who had once walked their lands and joined them in the White Council. Though Rivendell eventually became empty, and Lothlorien grew quieter as the Elves departed for Valinor, the memory of Gandalf lingered among the few who remained. His name was spoken with reverence, as one who had defended Middle-earth out of love, not ambition, and who had stood between them and the shadows with a strength they would always honor. As the centuries passed, Gandalf's tale gradually grew into a myth, a story told around firesides, a memory preserved in stone carvings, murals, and manuscripts. Across Middle-earth, bards and storytellers wove tales of the Grey Wizard who had come to guide the free peoples. Children grew up hearing about his battles against darkness, his wisdom that could lift even the heaviest of hearts, and his unwavering belief in the strength of all races. In the towns and villages, Gandalf's story was passed down in simpler terms, evolving into a fable about a mysterious wanderer who would appear in times of need, offering advice or lending a hand before vanishing like the morning mist. To those who heard these tales, he became a figure of folklore, a guardian spirit, a reminder that Middle-earth had once been watched over by a being of great compassion and courage. In some places, festivals were held in his honor, days of quiet remembrance for the sacrifices made by those who fought in the War of the Ring. In others, statues of Gandalf were erected, standing alongside those of Aragorn, Frodo, and the heroes of the Fellowship. People from all walks of life looked to his story as a source of hope, a reminder that even the gravest of challenges could be overcome when united in purpose and spirit. Even as the events of the Third Age faded into the mists of time, Gandalf's presence remained tangible. His legacy became embedded in the values and cultures of Middle-earth, his life a lesson in humility, courage, and resilience. From Gondor to the Shire, from Rohan to the ancient woods of Fangorn, Gandalf's influence endured, a guiding star that had lit the way through darkness and would continue to inspire for ages to come. And so, though Gandalf had returned to Valinor, his spirit remained forever intertwined with Middle-earth. His story echoed through the ages, a reminder of the quiet strength that lies within each soul, the power of unity, and the enduring light of hope. For as long as Middle-earth existed, so too would the legend of Gandalf the Grey, the White Rider, the wise and compassionate friend who had walked among them, leaving an indelible mark on a world he had loved and protected. Thus, Gandalf's story did not truly end, for it lived on in the hearts and minds of all who cherished Middle-earth, a beacon of courage, wisdom, and the promise that, in the face of darkness, light would always prevail.